Welcome everybody to Learn with Lowell. Today, I'm your host Lowell, serial entrepreneur, startup advisor, and your host for the show. Today, we're joined with Michael Forrest. I don't know, for some reason I was thinking Michael Forrester, which is I think like closer to an actor's name, but Michael Forrest of Biophysical Therapeutics, working on aging, and boasts George Church as an advisor. If you like this type of content, you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe because it tells the Google gods that this is something worth watching. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So I did as big of a deep dive as I could on what you're building and what you're working on, and I have questions, but there are also some really interesting ones from online that I thought were just pretty on point. So I thought, why not take the opportunity to address them and at the same time learn about your company at the same time. So one person, Responsible Owl 3, which is a great name, said, and this is just for the heads up, this is a bit rough. They seem like a critic, but I think this is a great opportunity to alleviate that, and we can go into like the meat of it. This is comically basic take on the whole what makes people age and how to stop it question. Does this guy have a real PhD? I think that's mean. But if so, why is he explaining high school physics and biology as if they were groundbreaking insights that nobody has come up with yet? I think that the real question there is like what about what you're building actually does what you think it does? But at the same time, like I think just addressing that concern, because I looked at all the comments on every single post about what you're building, and generally that was kind of the consensus that people were coming to. Now that's the internet, they're mean people, but for people who don't know you, I think that's kind of fun to be like, hey, here's this criticism, let's hit it right on. So what do you have to say to Responsible Owl 3?
Okay, yeah. Well, my blood's boiling as I hear that, really. So I mean, the guy's a critic, really. There's no question there, really. It's just crap, really. But I mean, so let's go through. I mean, I have got a PhD, so I've got like I studied biochemistry at Cambridge, and I've got a PhD. But I mean, what was even the criticism there? He's just saying like it's all rubbish. I mean, where do I even start?
Yeah, I think the big thing is what makes people age and how to stop it. That question, they felt that the approach wasn't that groundbreaking. Now, I see the like, hey, are you talking about school of physics and biology and making it seem simple? That's how you communicate on the internet. Like, if you want to talk like PhD molecules in an interview, like that's gonna like glaze so many people. So I think the real response that we should focus on, because you clearly have a PhD, there's like we can put aside. But I think, how does this approach of looking at the metabolism, why am I screwing with this word? The metabolic rate. Thank you so much. Yes, the metabolic rate, heating, and aging all relate to each other. Now, there's mice studies, but at the same time, like even I was wondering, because in the interview you did with longevity something, they talked about how like 40% of the world is in the tropics. So then, even on that, so then would there be an aging disparity between people who live in the tropics versus the colder periods? Like, so is that something like we see as one element? Like, is there evidence of this in the wild, basically, outside of the mice who had their temperature reduced through genetic modification?
Okay, so to put it most simply, so if you slow the metabolic rate of a mouse, or like a wasp, or a fly, or a worm, or fish, if you slow the metabolic rate, you can actually extend their lifespan. And that wasn't found by me. That's been actually known for quite a long time. For many of those species, it was first shown in mice in 2006, and it was published in Science, which is one of the big prestigious science journals, arguably the most prestigious. And the guy that did that, Bruno Conti, he's actually an advisor to the company. So there seems to be this link between metabolic rate and lifespan. They're inversely proportional. So like if you slow metabolic rate, you can actually extend lifespan. Okay, and so where the company comes in is that we've actually got drugs that can actually slow metabolic rate. So then the prediction is, because there's this linkage between metabolic rate and lifespan, the drugs that can slow metabolic rate might be able to slow aging and extend lifespan. So that's the next thing to test. And we're actually going to do that in human tissue ex vivo. So that's the next experiment. So and also talking about you're talking about what's the relationship with humans. So that's interventional data. So like if you actually slow metabolic rate, you can make things live longer. So that's interventional data. Observational data within humans is humans with a lower metabolic rate per unit mass, they tend to live longer. Okay, so that's actually been seen in the human population. And that came out of a big study. It's called the Baltimore longitudinal study of aging. So on entry into the study, they kind of did admin on the people, like recorded different things like the metabolic rate, for example, and then they monitored them over the subsequent 40 years. And so then they saw, who died before who and things like that. And then if you look at that data, you actually see this inverse relationship between metabolic rate per unit mass and lifespan. So it's actually been seen in humans as well. And then the other thing is like calorie restrictions slows metabolic rate. So like when you have less calories, it's like your body kind of like shuts down a little bit to conserve calories. And one thing that actually does is it ramps down metabolic heat generation. So like your body's temperature drops slightly. And calorie restriction is very well known to extend lifespan, like in mice, for example. The jury's still out on humans. Just because humans have got like such a longer lifespan, the experiment's a lot harder to do. But in mice, it's well known to extend lifespan, and that's probably the biggest modulator of lifespan that we found today. And also what they have shown in humans is when you do calorie restriction, your metabolic rate does slow and the body temperature drops slightly. So that's seen in humans as well. So given that, if that is the reason why calorie restriction extends lifespan, then and given that happens in humans as well, you'd expect calorie restriction to extend lifespan in humans. So that's
I think that's a good response. I think that hits it on the head. I mean, if we see it in human populations, we see it in animal populations. We have research data going back from 2006. And there's going to be more. I think you talked about an article with Brian Kennedy of Singapore. They're going to do more. I think they're working on a mouse research.
He wants to do a mouse lifespan study with it. But it's not just since 2006. It actually goes way back when. So, for example, in flies. So some of this stuff is it's one of those things where it's in the literature, but then it kind of gets forgotten. So this actually precedes 2006. So with flies, for example, flies are cold-blooded. Which means they don't metabolically generate heat. So their body temperature just follows the ambient temperature. And metabolism is actually temperature dependent. So like so in a fly, if you make the ambient temperature more, you can speed up its metabolic rate. If you make it less, you can slow down its metabolic rate. And if you actually reduce the ambient temperature, I think I can't remember how many degrees it was. It was like a few degrees. And then they actually made the flies live 86% longer, which actually is like a very big lifespan effect. And they've done it in other people have done it in worms, done it in fish as well. Cold-blooded, they're cold-blooded as well. So you can just control their metabolism by controlling the temperature of the water that they're in. And that all preceded the mouse study in 2006. But the mouse study in 2006 is most nice because that's actually in mammals. So then we get more excited, like when things are in mammals. And what they actually did was it's a very nice experiment. So there's a part of the brain that kind of monitors what the body temperature is to set that controls heat generation kind of thing. So they actually did this genetic manipulation in the brain that made the brain think that the body was hotter than it was, so then it directed less metabolic heat generation. And so the mice actually had less metabolic heat generation, a slower metabolic rate, and they actually lived longer. And their body temperature fell very slightly. Their mean body temperature fell 0.34 degrees C, and then it actually made them live 20% longer. And a body temperature drop of 0.34 degrees C is like pretty much imperceptible. Like our body temperature jumps around by more than that within a day and between days. With the circadian rhythm, and also like women, for example, their body temperature varies with the menstrual cycle, a lot more than 0.34 degrees C. And so where the company comes in is we've actually discovered like this new reaction that mammals use for metabolic heat generation and a drug to specifically inhibit that reaction, and shown in mice that the drug can actually reduce metabolic heat generation and slow metabolic rate. So the drug because this is the other thing. So people just read like these odds and sods on the internet where it's all kind of very simplified. But underneath that, there's actually a paper, a preprint paper. And then underneath that, there's actually like patent applications, which is like into the real nitty gritty. So if you want to go deep, you know, there's a lot of stuff there, a lot of experimental data and new drugs, especially. So the companies, like, I think very differentiated by actually having drugs. So there's things that actually we can try. So you can say they might not work, you know, but I think the stakes, if they do work, it's worth trying, you know. And so there's other people that are kind of like hand waving. So I mean, this guy, like the critic, you know, this is saying the critic doesn't count. He's got nothing. He's got no answers. He's got like no drugs. He's not like, actually I think something. I mean, but basically, I dismiss a lot of these people anyway, like on Reddit. Like if you listen to them, you know, you're gonna. But I think like if you want to make a criticism, a thing to do is like one in, one out. So like if you're saying that's wrong, what's your answer, kind of thing? And they've got nothing. So like,
they never go that route. Yeah, and I just to interject.
Yeah, so if because it's so easy to be a critic. So like if you want to criticize someone and take someone down, you've got to replace it with something, and then that just wipes those. All these people away because they've got, you know, they go, oh, that's not the reason for aging. That is. Well, then what is then? They've got no answer. Yeah. So, and the thing is, this is all like work in progress. This is a test of it, you know. So like we've shown before that there's this link between metabolic rate, and now we've got a drug that can actually slow metabolic rate. So let's try that, you know. And if it works, then the world is a very different place because you know, aging is, you know, I arguably one of the biggest problems in the world. And so, you know, and if we just leave it be, like with at the moment, we're getting the worst of everything. Like people are living longer, but then they're getting one or more diseases of aging. So then they kind of get debilitated and incapacitated. And it's actually going to cause a demographic crisis. Like your parents get sick, they get Alzheimer's or something, and then you have to look after them, but then you get old and then you get sick. And like, you know, there just aren't enough people to kind of look after. So it's actually something has to be done. And another criticism is people go like, it shouldn't even be done. We shouldn't even be attacking this. But if you just leave things to run their course, we're headed for a real crisis. And people don't even really understand this yet. You know, in the UK, for example, it kind of like you get snappers of it in winter, like when flu season comes around, the health system really starts to crack. And that's with the amount of old people that we've got now. Like in the future, you know, there's going to be a lot more. So yeah. So it's something that you know, something has to be done about it. And I'm actually in the arena, you know, trying to do something about it. Whereas you know, these guys on Reddit, they're just like you know, in their mum's basement or whatever, just like speaking crap on Reddit.
Well, if I can interject, I think you handled the criticism extremely well. And I also agree that generally, if you criticize, I think you should offer like, hey, here's some things that maybe you could do better. And what I liked about starting with the show with that question is because sometimes people just say things and they don't understand. Like, there's a deep well of passion behind what you're doing. Like, you're not doing this for the fun of it. I mean, the knowledge is knowledge. Like, you didn't get a Ph.D. because, you know, for fun. You did it because you were very passionate about this stuff. Yeah. And there's research and there's all these things. So I thought it was a great way to just start, hit this on the head. In response, maybe they'll be more wary in the future about just like making a criticism. Maybe they can make some suggestions. At the same time, I think you hit every single one of their concerns. Is it real research? We have, you know, like you said, mountains of stuff backing it up. That these are phenomena that are worth investigating to see more about. You have the background to do it. You have the support to do it. You have the advisors to help you, and you have the ambition to do it. And so, I laud you for doing it, and for, you know, just letting. Sometimes it's good to like look at our critics, and even if they are like a basement dweller or like someone at Stanford or whatever, I think like this person could be anything. So like give them the benefit of the doubt on that. But at the same time, like, I completely get it. Like, criticism's like pretty tough, but I think you handled it really well.
Another thing I'd say is like, because I have actually engaged with some of the comments on Reddit. So I did try and educate people so now I'm in a different phase. So this has been ongoing for some time, and like you know, for a long time I didn't want people to know what I was doing, but now it's all like patented and protected and things like that. So I'm in a different phase, and I'm trying to get you know, disseminate it and try and get people interested. And as you say, like, some very high profile people are even interested now, like George Church joined the advisory board, and he didn't come easily. It was back and forth and stuff. But so some people completely misunderstand it. Like, some people are thinking that I was accelerating metabolism, which, I mean, it's very clear in the thing that I'm not. And then, they're typing away going, oh, this is all like, does he not know that accelerating metabolism is very dangerous and stuff? And because there are drugs that accelerate metabolism, one called dinitrophenol. And I kind of gave up engaging with it because I kind of said, like, no, it doesn't, and then just, you could lose a lifetime there. It's just a quagmire of just rubbish, really.
I agree. I think from now on, whenever you see that, you can just link them to the beginning of this interview and say, asked and answered, we got you. You don't need to answer it anymore.
I think I even said to one guy, with kindness, I will not respond to you again, because like I've got things to do, and like, what the hell are you doing? Just like writing, you're never going to get anywhere in life just writing crap to like on the internet, like this criticism and slide stuff. And if you know better, then by all means, you get a drug, and let's see how that goes. But this is
But I hear you, and I apologize for starting with that. That was a rough way to begin. But at the same time, like, you crushed it. And from now on, people can have that and just have that teed off. This is serious stuff, serious research. You're spending a considerable amount of your time and energy doing it. And you're not doing it for the lulls of it. Like, you're doing it for the benefit of people. And at the very least, the research you're going to do might reveal something that helps people. And even just talking about it, hearing your passion behind it, I think it's very inspiring to actually care. Because I think sometimes people they go through their daily lives and they don't, like, they have a job maybe they don't care about. And so they're not, when they look and engage with people, they just think, oh, that person doesn't care either. And so I love the passion, honestly. It's very inspiring to talk to a scientist that actually can get fired up about their work. Like, there are times where you talk to someone and it's like, you could be talking about like the price of rice or tea or their work, and it's like, it's all the same, because they're just like, their boiling point like doesn't change. So I hopefully everyone who's listened in hears the passion, and if they do make a comment, maybe some helpful suggestions if there is a criticism, and we'd love to hear you in the comments as well. Recently, I discovered a way to shadow ban people, which is kind of fun. I don't do it often. It's only the people that are like, get the Bitcoin, and they'll like start like comment harassing and stuff. So,
well, no, I did get a bit frustrated at one point because I want people to understand. That's the thing. So I get a bit frustrated with people like coming in going, oh, he increases metabolism, and then maybe people would think that, and then they get confused. And so I really went to town on that guy. I said, like, well, you have to stop doing that. You're actually misinforming people, and you're harming like my message. And I even kind of like got a bit on the front foot and stuff and said, like, you really need to look at your life, kind of thing. What the hell are you doing? Just, attacking, like, it's just worthless. It's less than worthless. It's actually kind of negative. It's actually like harming me. I'm trying to move things forward. And by all means, maybe the drugs won't work, but there's enough there, I think, to merit testing, and there's actually something there, something concrete to actually test. And so and one of the theories of aging is that like kind of metabolism kind of gives life, but then it produces damaging byproducts which cause damage, which is aging, which ultimately takes it away. And so this work kind of fits in with that, and there's actually a test of that. So the work before, the mouse experiments and all that stuff, that's pointing to that. But then it would be very nice to test it with this drug, and if this drug does extend lifespan, which I actually think it will, and massively so, because I actually think so aging kind of gets like sniggers a little bit. Like, I've even got friends that go like, aging isn't like a credible field of inquiry kind of thing, and if you study it, you're not kind of scientific. But that's the most unscientific thing ever, because there must be a reason for it. So you're almost saying like aging's outside of like the field of scientific inquiry. There must be a reason, and you can see that nature can push it around. Like different species have different maximal lifespans. Like a mouse will only ever live 4 years, whereas a bowhead whale lives over 211 years. So nature knows how to push it around, and we're even pushing it around a little bit. Like with this metabolism thing, we can push it around. So there's promising stuff here about, and I actually think that I figured out why different mammal species have different maximal lifespans. So in mammals, the majority of metabolic rate is actually for metabolic heat generation to keep the body at 37 degrees C. But actually, fueling this new reaction that I found, there's kind of like a futile metabolic reaction. They kind of create something, destroy it, create something, destroy it, create something, destroy it. And they're actually doing, whenever energy is transferred from one form to another, then some of it's dissipated as heat. So they're kind of like doing this thing, and it's futile, but it's not futile because it's actually generating heat. That's what it's actually used for. And in geometry, this isn't something about animals. This is just something about geometry. Smaller objects have a larger surface area to volume ratio. So what that means is like a mouse, every gram of a mouse has to produce more metabolic heat to keep its body temperature at 37 degrees C than in a whale, for example. And so the metabolic rate of a mouse per unit mass is like much, much faster than a whale's. And you can even, that's reflected in its heart rate. The heart rate of a mouse is like 800, 900 beats per minute, whereas the heart rate of a whale is just 1 to 2 beats per minute. So I actually think, like if you to have a mouse and you were to keep it in an ambient temperature at 37 degrees C, that means its body temperature, it doesn't have to produce any metabolic heat to keep its body temperature at 37 degrees C. And so in that case, you could give the drug a massive dose of this drug, which would kind of like shut down its metabolic heat generation massively reducing its metabolic rate, maybe even to that of a whale. So you'd slow its heart rate from 800, 900 beats per minute to 1 to 2 beats per minute. And I think in that instance, you could actually make a mouse live massively longer. You know, like a multiple, a huge multiple. I mean, we'll have to try, and that's what Brian Kennedy wants to test it. So he wants to do a mouse lifespan study with it, and starting with older mice to kind of expedite the process. And what you might say then is what's the actual applicability of that to us? The company. So basically, the company's got ambitions really to solve aging and many things, and cancer, for example, got like cancer drugs, and but like the first thing is to kind of like chase the cosmetic opportunity. So if you've got a drug that so basically, for example, you got a cream here, and you just put the drugs in the cream, you just put it here, and the drug will reduce metabolic heat generation just here and slow the metabolic rate just here, which I predict will slow the aging rate here. But this skin's still at 37 degrees C because the rest of the body's still producing heat, and heat transfers and keeps us at 37 degrees C. And heat's transferred especially because of blood flow. But one of the functions of blood flow is to move like heat around the body. And so the reason why I've gone for cosmetics is for cosmetics, you don't have to do any animal or human trials. Cosmetics is quite, the regulatory bar is very low. So be concerned, like when you take cosmetics, it's a bit insane. But we do want to do the studies. Like I said, the next experiment is to test whether the drug can slow the aging of human tissue ex vivo. And that's a very cheap study to do. And we've already got people that actually want to do it and just need to make the compound for it.
Yeah. And I think even while I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking of examples of where heat would affect things. Cause like, I know many of my female friends are really cold. They like generally all like when, especially like during the winter, they all trying to steal my body heat sometimes. And it's really cold. And cause I just roll around and I'm a thermos. Like if you like just left me out on the ice, I would slowly just melt through it, pretty quickly. But like they're always pretty cold. And so women typically live longer. So I wonder if that's a factor as well. Like just like how hot guys typically run versus women.
Well, no, that's interesting. So women actually, generally speaking, they have a lower metabolic rate per unit mass than men. So that might be explanatory for why like women live longer than men. And that might be because women have like a different body composition. They've actually got like more kind of insulation. So that might be why they can get away with like a low metabolic rate per unit mass. And what one interesting thing actually, people generally think that everyone's got the same body temperature, resting body temperature, and it's like 37 degrees C. They think that's kind of like mathematical constant of the universe kind of thing. But people actually vary in body temperature quite a lot, around about over 2 degrees C. So there's some people walking around with a resting body temperature of 35, and there's other people with a resting body temperature of 37.5. That's kind of like the range. And you can actually see that people with a lower body temperature actually live longer in this big study they did in Baltimore. And that kind of relates to them having a lower metabolic rate per unit mass, because your body temperature is kind of a function of your metabolic rate per unit mass. So then what I'd argue is going on there is people with the lower body temperature, they're actually using this reaction that we've discovered less. And so then they've got like this lower metabolic rate. And so they're producing less of these harmful byproducts per unit of time. And then, so they're aging slower, and then they actually live longer.
That's really interesting. How would you think it works with whales who are big and live in the ocean, which isn't like water just eats heat. Like it doesn't really keep heat very easily.
Yeah.
I imagine like the blubber is like insulating them, but is there anything weird going on with them?
Well, the biggest thing going with them is that they're big. They're so big. So remember I said about in geometry, like the bigger an object is, it's got less surface area for its its weight, so it's not losing heat as readily. So that's the big thing. So maybe like one way to live longer is maybe evolution did, like it was a byproduct of getting bigger. So you kind of like got bigger, and then you didn't have to produce like so much metabolic heat per unit mass. So your metabolic rate per unit mass went down, and then your aging rate down, and you actually live longer.
That'd be interesting, because it takes so much time to get to that size as well. Like if you just got to that size and then died like a year later, it's kind of inefficient to be as big. Like if you were as big as a whale, which size of buses, and you lived only like 10 years, it's like, well, that's maybe not the most efficient. I imagine evolution would slowly prune to live longer as well. It's like, it's survival.
Well, the other nice thing is that, like, so we've actually studied some species, not all species, because we haven't got like data for all species, but you can actually see there's an inverse relationship across species between metabolic rate per unit mass and lifespan, and also this new reaction that we found for metabolic heat generation and maximal lifespan. And like we think that actually is the reason why there's an inverse relationship between heart rate, resting heart rate, and maximal lifespan.
So the goal of the company is, I believe, to eventually be a platform where you have multiple molecules, multiple interventions for aging. And right now we're focusing on cosmetics, which is very interesting, because I have a number of episodes out for the longevity series, and there are people who keep saying, like, is there anything for cosmetics? Like, it doesn't actually have to make you live longer, but if it just kind of rejuvenated a little bit, like, people are very excited for that. So I definitely see a need there. I know there's like, it's very much the Wild West when it comes to regulation, which is bad, because if you want to do the right thing, which have some studies to like affirm what you're doing, and another business doesn't want to do that, they can spend less money and spend that money on marketing and then get better market share than you, which is, it makes it unfair when things are that's what I think people don't realize about regulation. It makes an even playing field where everything is not heinous. It's like, if I can pay my workers $1 and you pay yours like $20, and I take that extra money and I, whatever, I don't know, like it just like standardizes things. I was recently talking to, I think their episode's going up today, Alan Perlstein, who is working on cellular agriculture for chocolate and coffee. And basically there are businesses out there that use slave labor and deforestation to have those products. And his is made basically in a lab, so you don't have those problems. And so when there's not regulation, you can use technological innovation to make it so that, business A and B, if business A allows slave labor, their prices are lower, which is horrendous that anyone in America or anyone should be in slave labor anymore. And then, but if business B doesn't do it, their prices will be higher inherently. Then people won't buy it, because eventually everything becomes a price point. People don't realize that every day they're influencing the world by what they're willing to tolerate in terms of prices. Are you spending the time, and at the same time, how much time do you really have to like look through and like, okay, here are the 2 chocolate bars in front of me, one made by slavery, one by not, and there's a $1 difference. Like, is there a taste difference, or maybe about the same? So like, there's a lot of complexity going on here, and that goes to the benefit of the lowest common denominator, which goes to my question of, do you have any interest in validating it with further studies before just finalizing the product, or do you recognize that like this is an area where there might be business that'll like snake you and like take advantage of like the research that you see already? Like how do you see living in the Wild West while also being civilized with your PhD and your science background, George Hurst, and all these other things?
Well, yeah, there's quite a few points there. I'll just say before I go on to that, like the company, it's working on different things actually. So it's a bit of a platform company, but to kind of simplify it, I'm just talking about like, for example, that article, Longevity, it talks like there's only one drug. There's actually like a multitude of drugs really. So like on messaging, things kind of get thrown away just to make the message simpler. So for example, we're working on cancer drugs as well, and also like got ambitions like beyond much beyond cosmetics. But on the so I mean legally we could even like sell cosmetics today, but it's like you said, we want to do the studies before, you know, and actually kind of prove it all out, and then actually have something to be proud of and people can kind of get excited about. And so we want to do this next experiment where we actually see if the drug can slow the aging of human tissue ex vivo. So if it can, that would be a very exciting result. And then also we want to do like a mouse lifespan study with it to see if we can make the mouse live longer. And you say about like, so the cosmetics are very crowded marketplace. But the thing is, people are so desperate that they even buy things that they kind of know don't work really. And they spend quite a lot of money as well. Some of these cosmetics are outrageously expensive. And so they're just so desperate. They're like, they'll buy things that they kind of, they even must know in their heart of hearts, this really isn't doing anything. So if you like, the ambition really is to like have the mouse going, the drug making the mouse live longer and longer. And like, as the mouse lives longer and longer, you know, people get more and more excited. And then you say like, the same drug is actually in this cosmetic. So that's my, you know, biggest aspiration for it. So really kind of have something that you can really show is working, and then really capture the market actually, and maybe even grow it, because there's lots of people that don't use cosmetics now because they just like, well, that won't work, I'm not going to spend. But if you had something that was, you could really show was working, it could bring a lot more people in, and actually kind of like looking to license the compound to like a cosmetics company, like as big as we can, like so then you can access the market, like at huge scale de novo, and just kind of, you know, leave them to run it, because I don't know anything about cosmetics, so I don't want to be involved in, you know, marketing and things like that. Just kind of everyone's doing what they do best, and to get them excited that you take you need data, you know, so they as much and the more data that we get, the stronger position we are in like the terms that we can drive for a licensing agreement. So to answer your question briefly, we want to like prove it all out. And this is why I get very frustrated with people like kind of criticizing and trying to kill it before we even, you know, so there's something here, let's find out, you know. I mean, this is science really. This is what science is. You find out, and you look at things that have happened before, and then you kind of like make a mental model, and then you make predictions, and then you know, try it out. That's the way. Just it's so easy just to sit back and just go, well, you know, that's wrong, and then just get nowhere, get nowhere. So no, really I think there's, I mean, what I actually think, I mean, I have to kind of I don't know, dampen like how, but I think this is really, you know, this is I think this could really take us forward, like could really
I was thinking of different ways you could experiment on it, because in America there was a recent thing where truck drivers get like half their face that ages faster because it's just exposed to sun. It was like, well, you could give them cream for that half of the face and then compare to see how it works at the end of the year.
They do that. So one of the ways cosmetics are tested are like, you know, you put cream on one hand and not on the other. Or another thing is when you first test cosmetics, you actually rent space on someone's back. So like companies have like they rent a little disc and put the cream on to see if there's any reactions and things like that. But even that isn't mandatory. You know, there's so many cosmetic companies actually. I didn't know, so I didn't even really know about cosmetics till I started looking into this. And as I say, the reason why to go for cosmetics is just because it's so close to market. Because you know, and then hopefully get like a revenue and profit through that, which is actually quite special for a biotech to have. And then you can like drive that into other things, like you know, more experiments. And then so the ambitions are actually to, you know, because like so many diseases actually correlate with age. So like young people don't tend to get them. You only tend to get them if you're older. And there's quite nice graphs where if you see like, you know, times on the ages on the x-axis, and you can kind of see the disease incidence goes up like this, you know, and it starts to go by, you know, by 40 and, you know, by 60, you know, you're up here. It's kind of, and so a drug to slow aging could actually, and there's a thesis that those diseases correlate with age because aging is actually a causal drive to them. So if you had a drug that could slow aging, it could actually have like a therapeutic benefit for a huge number of different diseases, varied diseases. So, you know, Alzheimer's or age-related macular degeneration, they're all so different diseases, but they might have this common kind of hub at their core, which is aging. So if you have a drug that could slow aging, it could, you know, a huge number of different diseases it could have a positive effect for. So the company's got ambitions to have a drug to slow aging, and there's so many different applications for that if you're successful. And as I alluded to before, this is actually necessary because what's happening is the population is kind of aging and people are living longer, but they're not living longer in good health. They get one or more diseases of aging, which are very incapacitating and debilitating. And then they can't work and maybe even have to like have care. And then they're pulling people out of the workforce. And this is like a huge crisis that is coming. And that's why I get a bit frustrated because like one of the criticisms is people say we shouldn't even be trying to solve aging, like aging is a good thing kind of thing. But the default, if you leave it, we're going to be in a real muddle in the future. And we're kind of like hitting on it already.
I think that whataboutism I always feel is just so skin deep, you know, to keep with the cosmetic joke, but because people are always like, oh, why should we be going to Mars? Why can't we spend it on school systems and stuff? It's like, we can do both. Like the stuff that we're going to learn for going to Mars or doing this research, like if you care so deeply about roads, and I think that there's an argument to be made that someone who's like really dedicated to roads and improving them would have a good benefit on the community, go do that, and then let people like yourself who's excited for this type of work to do your work. And like, it's kind of like, I think people work from a scarcity mindset, like there's not enough resources in the world. And I think we are moving to the point, especially with rockets and other things, where we could potentially be in a post-scarcity society where there's enough to go around. Nobody hopefully lives in poverty and that type of thing. And so at the end of the day, like if you took someone who's really excited about roads and you said, no, you're gonna have to do longevity research for the next 20 years and maybe it won't work out and you'll be penniless by the end of it, you know, if it failed like completely, right? It's like, they're like, well, I wouldn't want to do that. It's like, well, then why would you do it to Michael? Like, let Michael focus on his thing that he's excited for and you focus on the roads or whatever else you're excited for. It's like everyone has their thing. And I feel like we need to appreciate people's different interests. Like someone who wants to work on roads, it's equally as valid as work on longevity. The difference is there are people who are very excited about this and want to dedicate their lives to it. And guess what? It'll benefit everyone else. So I feel like there's a level of just like being empathetic and understanding like people have interests and let them pursue those interests. And at the same time, I know it's hard for people to do that. There's a lot of people who can't touch that passion that you have very clearly for this work because they haven't been lucky enough to be exposed to something to be excited for, or they have like things in their life that like really push them down, you know, abuse or whatever. And so for anyone out there who's feeling that way, I hopefully you reach out. And if you don't know what your passion is, like maybe read Walter Isaacson's Ben Franklin. They talk about how to find your passion a little bit in the beginning. Basically, just try a bunch of new things. But if and at the same time, like hopefully there's like therapy and stuff as well, depending on your level of, you know, concern. But I think my opinion, and I'm curious, you know, if anyone else in the comments agrees or disagrees, is there's a lot of different things out there. And if we take you who has a passion for this thing and you're working on it, you're going to do better than someone who's just highly paid put on it. Like that person's going to check out. They're not going to do the best work. They'll do an okay job. But the person who has the foundation and has the passion and is going to go the distance, is going to do more than someone who has like maybe more money and and is just kind of doing it as a 9 to 5 way. I've seen that often in the businesses I work on, in that like people will say, oh, well, company X just got $10 million in finance and I only got 1 million. It's like, great, they're going to spend $10 million validating your idea in a different route than you were going to do, because you know yours is the optimal way of going about it. So just continue to execute on your thing, and eventually they'll die. I think there's a story in Silicon Valley of Airbnb where there was another company that just does this like they copy it. They literally copy and call Airbnb a light or something, you know, like they copy everything word for word, basically, but in a way that doesn't get them copy infringed. And what they want to do is basically get Airbnb to buy them out for several million, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars. And Airbnb was like, no, we're going to execute on this. And now they're stuck doing something that they don't even want to do. They just wanted a payday. And so eventually that other company died and they won overall. So I feel like it's like that. Stay to what you're interested in, learn some fundamental research, and people out there hopefully can be really supportive of it. Sure, you know, if there's something that you think is not being done well, you know, criticize it, but also offer some helpful suggestions, because it's hard to do what you're doing. Like there's a level of anxiety and stress that comes from doing what you're doing versus doing a normal 9 to 5. That I don't think people appreciate that element of it. They think founder of startup, oh, this guy's got to be like fabulously wealthy, you know, blah blah blah. It's like maybe at the end if things go well. But in the interim, like things aren't, you know, great. Like you got to work for it. You got to work really hard. It's like 100 hours.
So I think this is why it's so rare, because you've got to have like, so you've got to have the competence to actually find something new out, which we have already. I mean, so this is one example. So the reaction that we found for metabolic heat generation, we've proven that out now, and the drug actually does reduce metabolic heat generation, and no one would have believed that before. You know, if you said that's what's so it's actually a very big hole. It was such a big hole that no one even knew it was a hole. Like what's actually how a mammal's metabolically generating heat, and how is like a mouse per unit mass producing more metabolic heat than, you know, like a whale, for example. So that was a big hole, and we've actually found that out already. So there's already things we can like hang our hat on that we found out that were so kind of no one would have believed, you know. So I get a bit frustrated, like why people don't kind of like extrapolate the line, you know. So they've got the competence to find things new out, which they've done, and they say this is going to happen, you know. Let's follow the line and you know, see if that I've lost myself a little bit. There was there's when I was listening to you, I was thinking like there's loads of points, and I was like
I'll make my points more. I'll add more periods to my points and some pauses so you can jump in.
Okay,
yeah. I see where you're going with it, and I know we've been talking about cosmetics so far, but that's just one aspect of what you're working on. And any cosmetic companies out there who are interested in this stuff, you know, maybe reach out to Michael. Get in while the water is hot.
We're actually already talking to some, but they're very. I don't know. I'll keep it confidential a little bit. But they someone said to me that is like they're not really looking to solve aging. This is the thing. So they're kind of like looking for actual cosmetic, just kind of masking things. They're not so interested in actually, you know, slowing aging. They kind of put that out of their wheelhouse. They're like, well, that will never happen. So this is where the biophysical therapeutics is really differentiated, in that we're actually really trying to you know, crack aging, and you know, have even got drugs to kind of like test and things like that. So, but it's so out of their wheelhouse. It's not even like there's something that they're necessarily looking for.
That's a unique opportunity. If you not only can mask aging but reverse it and make that a competitive edge to their competitors who are just looking to do some faux leather type thing, not even real leather. I think that's a competitive advantage. Yeah.
Well, I get a bit frustrated because, so they don't see, like, say for example, after this next experiment, like if we do show that the drug slows aging of human tissue ex vivo, like what is the company worth then? So then there's no messing around. You have actually slowed. But then they maybe can criticize that you haven't actually done it in vivo, you've done it ex vivo. So, but then, you know, the company would be worth a lot more. Like, why don't they kind of try and preempt it and come in now? And then actually we could use that money to kind of drive things forward. But yeah, I remember actually what I was going to say. Yeah, so you've got to have, you got the ability to find new things out, but then also the determination to kind of like see it through.
Yeah.
and you know, that's hard, and also it's a lot easier now, because for a long time I it was all secret, you know, so I've sat on this for actually quite some time, like patented it and stuff. So yeah, it's very hard. So the number of people that could actually have that is like it's very small, and real determination. Like I've done hard things in my life before, but like was in the army and things like that, and this has been hard, you know, like really hard.
Well, thank you for your service, though. I think you served in probably the UK then, right? You're. I don't think you're an American. I think you're a UKian.
No, I'm in the UK. Yeah, I'm from the UK.
Yeah. So then you get the. Is it called the Army in the UK, or is it like the Royal Marines or something? You guys have like cool names for things.
No. So the Royal Marines is kind of like the equivalent of the US Marines. So it's like
okay. So there is actually an army.
Yeah, in the UK it's affiliated to the Navy, and in the US I think the Marines is like a separated branch of the military. I think. Yeah,
it is.
I think they're kind of.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's the number one Air Force in the world is the U.S. Air Force, and the second one is like the U.S. Army, and then like the third is like the U.S. Marines.
Yeah. I've actually been in a U.S. Marine helicopter. They've got like these crazy. I've forgotten what it's called now. They look very strange. Yeah. So I actually, like, maybe I'll explain that a little bit. So I was actually in the reserve, the Army Reserve, when I was doing my PhD, and I actually had a bit of a shocker with my PhD. So I found new things out about. So like my expertise really is like kind of computational biology. So the PhD was in computer science, but as applied to biology. So I was actually making computational models of like brain neurons. And I found out something new about how the brain worked. I found out like there's something called the sodium-potassium pump, and I found out that was directly involved in brain computations, like in Purkinje neurons. And it's like I said, like people kind of, and it wasn't people on Reddit this time. It was actually people like, you know, to get the PhD, you kind of have to publish your work like in journals. Yeah. And I was submitting to journals, it was getting pushed back, and they were saying, no, that can't be right, because it's actually like quite a fundamental flip, and people were like, you know, a bit put out about it. And so I had a nightmare, because I was stuck. Like I couldn't kind of get the PhD because I couldn't publish my work. And I was saying, right, this is right. This is right. And they're getting pushed back. But anyway, in the end, it was right, you know, and other people started showing it and stuff like that. And then I could publish my work and get my PhD. But during that time, I actually, like, when she joined the army full time, I got like so frustrated, and I actually thought, right, that's me with science, you know, like, and I got very despondent with the whole thing, which is why when I had these ideas to do the stuff I'm doing now, this wouldn't have happened if I had applied for grants and things like that in the university. So I just got my head down, and I just and had some savings from the army. I just got my head down and you know, did it, and then got data kind of proving it out. But still, you know, you got like criticism and stuff. But so but I mean, it's more than an idea. There's actually, like, as I said, there's like things have already been shown, like quite big fundamental things, like how mammals metabolically generate heat. That's like a you know, that was a hole, and that's now been cracked.
Well, I thank you for your service regardless, even though it's for a different nation. I think America and UK are probably, you know, I think we're like, you know, buddies, even though we beat you up in the Revolutionary War, which I hear that you guys don't study that much. You guys just like, yeah, who cares? It's like one of like 20. We care more about like India leaving than anything. I don't think you guys care about America leaving. You're like, yeah, good riddance. We don't even want you anyway.
Yeah, no, we don't actually. Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, every now and again when I'm talking to someone from the UK, I'll bring up, yeah, so, you know, we beat you guys up. I don't know. It's like the American in me.
No, so you like joking about it? You like joking about it? Because I was in America one time on Independence Day, and I made a joke about it. I said, like, this is a day of mourning for me, and they got really pissy about it. They like they didn't. I was joking, and like they're really sensitive. But no,
that's hilarious. You didn't tell it to the right crowd. That's hilarious. I would. That's hilarious. I don't know where. Maybe you were like in Texas or something. Like, they're very jingoist down there. But yeah, that's hilarious.
In New York, actually. No, they're really. I don't know. They didn't get the joke.
Day of mourning for me. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's good. Funny. That's good humor. Yeah, I guess it would be well. People always wonder like, what would the U.S. be if like we stayed under the umbrella of the British Empire? It's like, well, we probably wouldn't have been anything because like the Britain was deliberately sabotaging the mercantile and industrial base of the U.S. so that like they were like hobbling us. So once we left you guys, we grew pretty fast, and everyone came here because we're land of opportunity. But
I'm a big fan of the US.
Yeah.
Like I really like it's incredible. Like for science, for example, like and this is the thing that people don't realize. And even in England, and actually, sadly, it's growing in the US. People don't realize that science, technology is what drives economic progress. And so, for example, it doesn't like you said before about kind of like scarcity and things like that. These kind of things, they actually grow the pie. So they kind of think, oh, if you get money from that, you're kind of like taking money away from something else. But like these kind of innovations, they actually grow the pie and make kind of everyone richer. So like a drug that could slow aging, that could have an incredible economic impact. So for example, they've actually there was a paper in Nature Aging. David Sinclair was one of the authors, and there's some economists, a guy at Oxford and a guy at Harvard. I've forgotten their names, sadly, but they did a calculation. If you were to slow aging if you were to make people slow aging and make people increase life expectancy in the US by just 1 year, they calculated that would have an economic benefit of $38 trillion just by 1 year. And like I said that people have a variation in body temperature, and people with a lower body temperature live longer than those with a high body temperature. So this drug that can actually reduce metabolic heat generation, I've done like a calculation. What if you were to give the drug to people with a higher body temperature, just a very small dosage to bring their body's temperature down to a lower body temperature, I predict that you could increase life expectancy. And I did calculations, you can actually increase US life expectancy by more than 1 year. So then that would be an economic benefit of like 38 trillion they've calculated. And just think how much, money that is really. And then that's an economic benefit that kind of gets like shared by everyone.
Yeah.
And then another thing that people might say, like patents and things like that, maybe I'll go into that a little bit. People don't realize that you and I say this as someone doing it because you kind of like go to someone and go like, right, there's this drug, it could slow aging, or it could have a treatment effect for cancer. They give, I wasn't going to use the terminology. They really don't get. They're kind of like, right, well, what's the return going to be? Okay, so this is because people they always do this when there's a new drug, and they kind of go like, oh, that shouldn't have a patent and stuff. But you don't see like it needed that patent to get to that stage. So in the UK, they're getting very bad on this. They're kind of like, let's just cancel all the patents and stuff. But what you don't realize is then you're never going to have new drugs. So just realize what you're doing when you do that. And the reason is, so like developing a new drug is very expensive. So, and then they get it to the market. And if they don't have a temporary monopoly on it, then other companies will start selling it, and they're not in the hole for all that money. So then they can sell it lower. And so the company that actually developed the drug will go out of business. So this is why they actually need that and that monopoly. And also what people don't realize is like by the time a drug actually gets to the market, there's often only like a few years of patent term left anyway. So you just pay for the drug for a bit, and then it's basically free forever, because then the price comes right down. And so like it's not even very much over the cost of goods after that. So it's actually like quite good. And the danger of playing around with it is that then you could by all means play around with it, but just know that maybe no new drugs will come. You could kill the whole thing. And and it's important that people know that, because as someone from trying to raise money and things like that for new drugs, like literally they say like, we've got a new cancer drug here. It's not like they go, oh yeah, we're going to help with that. They because also the other thing is like the risk of drug development is quite high. Loads of biotechs actually just flame out, like burn, like literally torching millions, maybe even hundreds of millions. So to offset that risk, they need a very high return. and if you're going to risk like tens of millions, you probably need hundreds of millions back. If you risk hundreds of millions, probably need billions back, kind of thing. So there needs to be that. And I've got into like Twitter things about that and stuff. So I've had my time wasted on this kind of stuff. But it's important people, and maybe I wouldn't have known if I hadn't had this experience as well.
Yeah, I think that. Well, I know you do some writing too. I read some of your articles. I think they're on Medium, and so I think like a good thing to do. It's just something I do. It's like when I see a question, I will make like a fact about it, like a frequently asked question thing, and then I'll just be like, "Here's the fact," right? And, like I make it for podcast guests and stuff like that. So it's like, "Oh, here are the frequently asked questions," and I don't know whether you looked at it or not, but it's like it's there if you're like you're curious about something, and so yeah, I just like, so these people just like you can engage with them and then give them your energy, or you could be like, oh, okay, that might be interesting. And then you make content that then like gets more people looking at your stuff as well, and which might be like a more healthy way to look at things. So
all these articles and things like this is a new thing. So it's something that I realized, because I'm actually quite a shy person I'm not that shy, like meeting people, but the thought of being like etched into the internet forever just terrifies me. And so like doing all the like stuff, this is actually quite a big leap for me. But I realized it's something that I've got to get out there more, really. So this is something that like out of my comfort zone that I didn't want to do, but it's part of the job. So like so now I've been like trying to, because I want people, I'm excited about it, and I want people to get excited about it, to know about it. And that's why I get I was actually quite put out by some of those Reddit guys, because I felt that they were harming my explanation. That's what I mean. Say whatever you want. That one that you said, I'm not even upset about that one, because it's just not a nonsense kind of thing. But when they're trying to say things like it increases metabolic rates, and don't they know, like, because there's actually a drug that increases metabolic rate called 2,4-dinitrophenol, which you can. I'll say it's like it does actually like increase metabolic rate, and people use it for a weight loss drug, and it does actually work, but it's super dangerous because it actually makes the body less efficient. So like it generates more metabolic heat. So people, you actually die if you take too much of the drug. You actually die in a very super nasty way, and but it's still used, like bodybuilders use it quite a lot. And so like one of the guys was like, does he not know like these drugs are dangerous and stuff? And I got very annoyed, because he's like saying it's actually the opposite of what the drug does. It actually slows the metabolic rate. And so I just thought he's like, muddying the waters, and I got I was very annoyed with that. And then I try and like educate them, but then they just come back with more crap kind of thing, and then they're just losing loads of time.
Yeah, you can't educate people who don't want to be educated. I think you could do like that political. I think like that maybe like something you could do is that you do like that politician thing, which is like, what do you think about Tom Cruise's stance on infrastructure? And then you say, oh, infrastructure. Have you heard about my new plan for healthcare? And you just talk about the only thing. So if the concern is that they're muddying the waters, you can just like be like, here's my post on explaining how that's not the case. So like you never really engage with them. You just always are on message for your thing. So then they never really waste your time. Yeah.
Well, that's a good way to do it. So maybe what I'll do in the future, it's just not respond at all. So like, and then the definitive documents of what I've written. So like, if you want to understand it, like, and also for quite a while, I was having problems explaining it, but I think that article recently on longevity technology, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, that was good.
Like share it like underneath this video or something. But I think that explains it very well, and like kind of like quite succinctly. And then if you want more detail, there's actually a preprint paper, and which is kind of like ongoing work. That's like I think that's version 3. It just was more work gets done. Then I kind of like update it and submit, so version 4 will be shortly. And then there's the actual patents underneath, like if you're actually interested in, but even lots of scientists don't even read patents actually, which is, but the thing is, that's where a lot of all the best work is really. So there's a saying actually, publish, like in journals, your failures and patent your successes. So in biotech and pharma, in biotech and pharma, like a lot of the best work is only getting published in the patent literature. So if you don't read patents, then you're missing a whole, the best stuff really. And the thing is, to really understand a patent, you kind of have to have written patents in some sense to kind of understand but the best way to kind of understand how they're structured and things like that is actually to do it.
How'd you learn that? How'd you learn? So like, I've looked at patents, but I don't have like specialized knowledge on this. Is there like a book or a resource that would give me a good overview to better understand it?
So there's there's two things going on. There's like the kind of manuals. So for example, and also it gets tricky because it can be different in different jurisdictions. But say like the European Patent Office, they've got like a manual, and you can read the manual. And then the other thing is there's case law. So you've got to be like and when you're doing examination, actually, you're often like pulling things from case law. And examination is a bit of like a combative. They make arguments, then you've got to make arguments, and you often like pull from case law, and you've got to know the manual inside out. And then the other thing is, so that's kind of like almost theoretical, but then you've also got there's a practical element, like how you actually write it and stuff that isn't in the manual. But how I learned to do it was I actually used patent lawyers, like Mew Byrne-Ellis, which was like, so I basically found things out, and then I was actually quite disciplined for a scientist because I found things out, and normally what happens is then they just publish it or tell people and stuff, and then you can actually never get a patent on it. Once something's in the public domain, you can never get a patent, which basically kills it really, because then no one will pay to take it through clinical trials and stuff. And so much work kind of gets lost through this, and this is kind of like the inverse. And so lots of scientists don't even realize this. They kind of think, right, I need to publish this, and if I patent it, that would be so evil, kind of thing. But they're doing they are unknowingly doing evil themselves, because if they don't patent it, then it's just lost forever. So so I found these like new drugs, and actually maybe I'll go after this. I'll go into, I don't know whether it'll be too technical, but I'll go into how I actually, because actually how I came across. Maybe I will go into it. Maybe I'll go into it. So how I. So basically, I found new things out, and I used like a patent lawyer, and then like really good patent lawyers, and then they helped me, and then also I watched what they did, and so kind of learned from them, and then I got to the point where I could actually do some things myself, and then slowly over time could do more and more things myself, which has been, so for example, in Australia, I argued it like completely before the Australian Patent Office and got it to grant. But how I actually first kind of got it's quite a long story. So I actually there was a time actually, I said I was a fan of the US, and I may still do this at some point. So I was actually thinking to get a green card, and there's like there's actually a program called Alien of Extraordinary Ability, like for a scientist to get a green card there. And for that, you have to get references from scientists that don't know you. They've read your work, and then they have to say good things about it. So with that, I actually got a reference from a guy called Michael Levin, who's actually like quite a high profile.
I'm talking to him on Monday.
Okay, good. Yeah. And he was very kind. He wrote me like a very nice reference. So about my PhD work, and he was asking me lots of questions about it. I remember I said it was all about membrane voltages and like finding how like brain neurons compute. And he was really asking me a lot of questions about it. And I said to him, like, why are you so interested? Like, because he works on kind of development and cancer a little bit on the side. And he said, no, it's not just brain neurons that use these membrane voltages for signaling. It's actually used by like cells during development, and also cancer cells have a different voltage across some of their membranes. And so that really captured my imagination, the cancer aspect, because I'd always heard people complain you can't hurt cancer without hurting normal cells. They're like too similar, and lots of chemotherapies, they actually hurt cancer cells, but they also hurt normal cells as well, which is why the side effects are so horrendous. And with cancer, it's almost like you take the chemotherapy and it's hurting you and it's hurting the cancer. It's kind of like who kind of gets killed first.
Who dies first?
Yeah, and so, some people, they just can't handle it, so they rescind consent to treatment, and then they just kind of like walk into the night, sadly. And lots of people don't even realize this until like it's too late, kind of thing. They get a cancer diagnosis, and then they're all alone. And so, because I've published some things on cancer, some cancer patients even contact me. So I get emotional there. And so they there's very few options. So, sorry.
No, I know a number of friends working on cancer. It's hard when you're talking to the patients and know that you might have something that could help them, but it just takes so much time.
Well, yeah, and also such a big shock because they don't know, so they kind of think this is kind of a sole thing. Like, if I do get cancer, it'll probably be okay. And the thing is, if you've got cancer, it can be operated on, like cut out, like maybe you stand a good chance. But if you've got like an internal cancer, like pancreatic cancer, and it's like found very late, and if it's inoperable, then you've got very few options. You could actually even be dead in like months. In fact that's actually the most common thing that happens. So anyway, there was. So I saw a difference there, and where there's a difference, like maybe you can attack cancer without hurting normal cells.
Yeah. And
so I thought, right, I'm going to find out why there's that difference there. So it's actually quite a big difference. So the cancer cells, they've got different voltage across their inner mitochondrial membrane, like a quite big difference, about 60 millivolts. That probably won't mean much to people, but that's like a huge difference. So there must be something going on there that's very different. So I thought, I'm going to find out why.
Just to interject, because I don't know the gradient, so let's give people a perspective. What is a traditional gradient in volts? And then like how big of a standard deviation is 20 from it? Like just like give people like the little bell curve. Like how big, so what is normal, and then for a cell, and then what's how big of a deviation is it?
So normal is about minus 140 millivolts. That's for a normal cell. So that it's more negative inside the mitochondria and the mitochondrial matrix. And then a cancer cell will be like minus 200, minus 210, minus 200, maybe minus 250. So, and this has been known for, this has been well known for decades, and it's even been leveraged in the clinic. So what you do is you get a toxin and you make it like very positively charged, and because like the mitochondria of the cancer cells inside is more negative, it will accumulate more of that toxin, and so that's even actually gone into the clinic. But sadly, I don't think it made it through. I think it like fell away at phase 2, because you're still doing the thing about toxins, and just, maybe the toxin will go into the cancer cells more, but it will still go into normal cells. And you've got the same problem where you've got like horrendous side effects, and people kind of like rescind consent to treatment, you kind of getting nowhere. But so this has been known for like decades, and I thought, right, I'm going to find out why. And I did find out why. So cancer cells, they have actually got a very different metabolism than normal cells. And actually, for example, that's illustrated by the fact that cancer cells are actually immortal, and our normal cells aren't immortal, of course. We don't live forever. So if you get cancer and we take a cancer cell from like your tumor and we plate it and we kind of give it food every day, you will die, and the cancer cell will keep on living. And in fact, like one of the cancer cells that's actually studied in laboratories now. Yeah. So Henrietta Lacks sadly long since died, but her cancer cells are still alive, and in laboratories all across the world. So again, so people like complain that normal cells and cancer cells are like so similar, you can't get one and not the other. But there's some pretty big differences here. Like, so there's a cancer, and that actually comes from metabolism, and I actually think it's because. Like I said, metabolism kind of gives with one hand, it gives life, but it produces like these harmful byproducts which cause damage and aging, which ultimately takes it away. And cancer cells are using a different metabolism where they don't produce so much damaging byproducts, but at the cost of like they get less energy from their food. So they get less, to be specific, they get kind of less ATP yield from each glucose molecule. So they're kind of they're kind of like optimizing for a different thing, for immortality, but then at the cost of like a more inefficient metabolism. And that effect is actually something called the Warburg effect. And the guy that discovered that, Otto Warburg, actually won the Nobel Prize, but for something different. And again, this is something that's been known for a long time, but just kind of forgotten really, and ignored. And so during the Warburg effect, what's happening is I might get a bit technical here, but like there's cancer cells are actually using glycolysis a lot more, and glycolysis, because for one thing, glycolysis produces metabolic intermediates for like a cell proliferation. So they want like a glycolysis going at like a very high rate, and glycolysis actually produces ATP, which actually has a negative feedback inhibition effect on the enzymes of glycolysis. And so like lots of ATP accumulates in the cytoplasm, and because of that, the adenine nucleotide transporter in the inner mitochondrial membrane reverses and actually starts importing ATP into the mitochondria rather than exporting ATP. And then that ATP actually, ATP synthase, instead of producing ATP, actually consumes ATP. And that actually causes this membrane potential, membrane voltage difference. And there were some actual drugs like around, Bristol Myers Squibb actually developed these drugs like a long time ago, over 20 years ago, that specifically inhibit the reverse mode of ATP synthase and not the forward mode. And so I thought, right, if my kind of model was correct, then these drugs should actually have anti-cancer activity. So I got them synthesized at a place called Wuxi Aptec in China, and then sent to the National Cancer Institute in the USA. And they tested them in this kind of in vitro assay, which they've tested millions of compounds in. And they've all present cancer drugs have been tested in that same assay. And this drug, I actually sent a few. They actually had like a greater anti-cancer activity than most present cancer drugs. So validating that. And then there was some kind of things that I did that showed that it was actually exerting the anti-cancer activity by actually hitting that target, which are actually in the preprint if anyone's interested. So
that's interesting. Yeah. So this is a branch of a project that you're going to be working on.
Yeah, so this is how I got into the aging thing. So, and I thought, right, I've got like a really selective cancer drug, because cancer cells are using ATP synthase in reverse and not in forward mode, and normal cells are using ATP synthase in forward mode. So I thought I had, right, I've got like a completely specific for cancer. But then I had a thought, like, maybe normal cells are using that reverse mode. Maybe they're producing ATP, but then deliberately destroying some of it, like to create a futile cycle to generate heat. And that's how, like, maybe that's how mammals actually metabolically generate heat. And then I thought, right, we can test that by actually giving this drug to mice. And if that's the case, then their body temperature should drop to the ambient temperature. So if the mice are in a ambient temperature of 37 degrees C, and you give them the drug drug can't drop their body temperature, because a mouse can be dead actually. And if it's the ambient temperature of 37 degrees C, its body temperature will be 37 degrees C. But if the ambient temperature is at, like, you know, normal room temperature, 21, 22, 23, then the drug should reduce its body temperature way down towards ambient temperature. And that's actually what happened. So then I realized, I found out how mammals are actually metabolically generating heat by this reaction. And then I knew from like way back that there was this link between metabolic rate and aging. So then I thought, right, well, the next thing to see is to see whether it can slow aging. And that's where I am now. And like, I've kind of disseminating it now because patents are published, and then I've done a preprint, and now I'm doing, these kind of articles just for the general public to try and get people interested and to kind of get money and like to move it forward.
Do you have any interest, or do you intend to apply for a SENS grant? I know they're looking for proposals pretty soon, and I think their GlycoSENS project would fit. I mean, there's like some relation there, but I know they're looking for people to work with under that umbrella. So are you gonna like query them to see if you can work under there with their grants?
So there's one, like, someone said, the thing is, so the thing about SENS is, so Aubrey de Grey, who's kind of like, the father, and I owe him a lot, because reading his book, actually as an undergrad, he did a PhD, and then he actually published his PhD thesis as a book, which I found very useful and very inspiring. But he's now said, like, metabolism is too complicated. We can't really understand it. Like, let's just let all the metabolic damage happen, and then we'll repair it. Whereas I'm kind of like, let's actually interfere in metabolism. I think I found a way to interfere in metabolism, and so to actually slow the damage. So what I'm doing, and I've actually been told this doesn't really fit under the SENS remit, unfortunately.
Aubrey left a long time ago. Well, not a long time ago, like 2 or 3 years. They're under new management. So have you talked to them recently, like with Lisa?
Yeah. Well, no, I actually spoke to Kevin Perrott, who's still involved in SENS, and he actually was very nice. He actually reserved an investment in the company, but he kind of said no, it wasn't like a SENS project.
Yeah, I think maybe the cancer component might be more SENS related. I think that seems pretty powerful. Everything you're doing seems pretty powerful in terms of like potentially having a big impact. Because you're trying to build out a platform company, you're focusing on the one aspect of what you're focused on is what we talked about previously, which is the cosmetic. What are some of the other projects? Is one of them going to be cancer related, or is the cosmetic the full focus? Like if you were to like pie slice it, a platform that does like multiple things. So I'm wondering what your other projects are.
Well, yeah. So before, like when I was kind of pitching it to people, I used to say different things like we're going to do this with cancer, we're going to do this with Alzheimer's and stuff. And people advised me. It was actually like quite a prominent. Maybe I won't say who he is, but like a Nobel Prize winner, kind of who's had like a lot of success, commercial success. And he saw my pitch and he said, "You need to just boil it down. Like you know, you're all over the place." And he said, like, I understand it, but like you're going to make investors' heads spin. You just got to like have a simple thing. And one thing that I found very useful, which was real kind of breakthrough in my explaining, was like you've got to explain it to someone else so well that they could explain it to someone else, like after them, kind of thing. So they've got to explain it. They've got to understand it so well that then they could explain it. And I was thinking, well, actually, maybe this is too complicated. You need like a little bit, just a nugget that they can kind of latch onto and just go, oh, okay. And so the nugget actually, for if you're interested, is just like slowing metabolic rate has been shown to extend the lifespan of like mice, flies, wasps, fish, and worms, and probably many other species. So, and we've got a drug that can slow metabolic rate. So then we predict that it could slow aging. So that's like the little hook.
It's much more simpler than it's I've people say, like, investors are like, I want a platform company, but then when you have a platform company which like has multiple options, they're like, well, no, I want you to focus on one thing. It's like, I don't think you understand that like how a platform works, because like I guess you could potentially work on like the technology of computation to develop like an AI thing that would then be used. Like you could like build the platform in that way. But yeah, they get kind of twitchy if you have more than like one product you're working on.
Yeah,
which makes sense. So you got to be focused.
Yeah, but then also if you got like one product to work on, then they go like, well, we're after platforms kind of thing. So it's just you can't win.
You can never make them happy.
Yeah, but there's and it actually took him telling me that, because other people had said that, but I respect, and I kind of ignored it. But I respected him so much. I was like, and then it kind of clicked. I was like, yeah, I've just got to throw everything else out. We're only going to talk about cosmetics. But there's actually, there's a lot there, and actually quite unrelated to this, like going for different targets and stuff. So, for example, there's a drug called almatrine, which is actually approved for emphysema. And I discovered that that's got anti-cancer utility. No one knew that. So, and that's because that's already been used in humans. Maybe I could go straight into phase 2 clinical trials. There's things like that, and I even had a bit of a detour with coronavirus. So almatrine actually helps like people with breathing, and obviously then you'd think like maybe it would help people with coronavirus infection, and so I patented that and kind of chased that for a while. Although interestingly, that actually people took it into phase 3 and actually failed phase 3 clinical trials for coronavirus infection, although they used a very low dose. But so there's lots of things that I want to do as well. So there's like lots of pent up work kind of thing, and as get more like resources and kind of move more things forward. So it's like almost like a dam of like being restricted by finances, and then once finances come in, then like move more things forward. And I get a bit frustrated sometimes, because I'm like, there's so much there and it could do so good. Why is it kind of it deserves to have like its legs and run.
Yeah. Have you heard of, I think it's vitaDAO? There's like a Healthspan blockchain thing where they can do like crowdsourced funding.
Yeah, but
I'm talking to one of the guys who runs it.
well, there's a saying like never kind of, if you multiply innovations too much, that's bad, so you've got like one risk, like will the drug slow aging kind of thing, and then you're kind of multiplying it by kind of like a business model risk. Like if you've got too many risks, I mean, I'm kind of
no, I'm not thinking of it in terms of a business model. I'm thinking of it in terms of fundraising. So there's groups out there that'll do like a crowdsource. It's like kind of like Kickstarter for serious stuff like this. And I'm not recommending them because I've been learning about them currently. It's just something I'm aware of, that there are, I think like Turn Bio, who I had one of the founders on. I'm having another one of the founders on in a couple months, but they did like $1 million raise on it. And basically what happens is like the people who helped raise the money, they get like a small percentage equity stake or something to that effect. Yeah. So instead of needing investors, it's like you do a crowdsource like Kickstarter, and it's just like one platform that does that. So it doesn't muddy your business model. It just like adds optionality in terms of where you get the money from. But I do think it'd be interesting if you were to write your book, similar to like Aubrey Gray with your PhD, saying I was right. And then, you could take all these negative comments and just like put that as like the cover. It's like, so when people read, it's like, oh, this is really mean. This is really mean. This is really mean. And he was right. And then you just flip the cover and it's like, and you can be like, ha guys, you could like, I think that might be a good way to like gin up
well,
PR.
I like to go back to that. So you said like the Reddit guy, I mean, they're literally, I don't know, nothing really. They're just worthless characters. But they're
that's mean. That's meaner than the comment.
But they, I hold them like in the lowest regard, like possible. But saying like, if you look at the history, like talking about scientists now. So if you look at the history of science, like it happens like every time, like when there's a big advance, like not like a kind of like an incremental thing, but when there's like a quite big leap, it always has a hard time, and science never really learns its lesson. Maybe like my biggest scientific hero is a guy called Peter Mitchell, and he had something called the he's like had something called the chemiosmotic hypothesis, which is like beautiful work. But this guy had he's fought every step of the way by everyone and had a horrific life, really. Had health problems and things like that, and he actually even had to leave academia to carry on working on it. He felt it was so bad he couldn't even do it within the system. But he was right, and he won the Nobel Prize for it. And so it's often it kind of goes through three phases. Like first is mocking, then like fought, and then kind of accepted and like, oh, it's always obvious. That was always going to be the case.
I hate that. Yeah, that irritates me. How often people will say, no, you're wrong. And then it's like, oh, you're making money and you're being successful. All right, well, now I'm on board. I think the Eminem said that you'll be surprised how many cousins you have after you're successful. Like everyone's like, oh, I'm cousin with this guy, like I'm your cousin, like hook me up with a car or something. But I know we're coming to the end. I'm clearly into books. What books are you reading or that you'd recommend people check out? It doesn't have to be related to this stuff. Because I mean, most of that's like in papers. So, but what are you reading that you recommend people check out? And I will read them. That's the fun thing. At least one person will.
Okay, yeah. I'm not actually a big reader of like kind of fiction. In fact, I may never read another fiction book again. I think me and fiction have gone our separate ways. I haven't really got the patience for it. So, but I like reading. I like reading about science, really, science things. So, I actually even really like enjoy reading textbooks. Actually, and I'd even recommend like a biochemistry. It's called biochemistry, called Stryer, which is a good one. Molecular biology of the cell by Albert.
I have a molecular biology of a cell. I think it's called Cell Molecular Biology. I read
there's
textbooks
another
too.
one.
I think they're fun.
There's another one, with a very similar name. I don't know about that one. I'm a fan of molecular biology of the cell, and it makes it because I think with aging, like lots of people are kind of coming into longevity, and they haven't really got like a bio background, and then they want to immediately jump into things. So, for example, like they think that they should be reading my preprint kind of thing, like from the off, and kind of judging it, but they need to take a step back and maybe like go to, and it's very enjoyable. You got like all beautiful diagrams and things like that. I've actually written a book as well, which is on Amazon, so I could recommend.
You can recommend it. I'm making a master document for every book recommendation that's been for 5 years with like 200, like 160 or whatever guests. There are so many books, but I'm making a master list. I think there's like 250 books, but every book that you recommend will be on the list. So you have to recommend yours to get on the list. So you have to say
so
it.
it's called,
And then I add it.
I think if I remember correctly, it's called Biophysics and Computations of the Cerebellar Purkinje Neuron. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend. It's a bit like technical, really. It's kind of like a bit of a technical document, so I wouldn't really.
So if you like textbooks, you'll like the book.
Yeah, so it's actually it's not like textbook. It's like it was actually like my kind of like my PhD research with a bit more kind of thing.
Okay, and, so you did basically an Aubrey de Grey. You pulled an Aubrey de Grey. Yeah. Sweet. Yeah, I'll have to.
I'd recommend Aubrey's book. So I read his. So he's got two books. There was one, I think it was published in 2006, 2007, called Ending Aging, which I haven't read actually for my sins. But I read his earlier book, which was his PhD thesis that he published, which is called the Mitochondrial Free Radical Theory of Aging, I think.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah, which I found, like very, it's very well written. I think that's a great book. I know I'll recommend. I like kind of like bioenergetic stuff, so I'll recommend like a textbook about bioenergetics. It's called Bioenergetics, and it's got called his surname's Ferguson. The other guy is called Nichols. Like if you just type in bioenergetics Ferguson, and that's like a super good book. And I think there's like, and actually that's Peter Mitchell's work is actually what first got me into bioenergetics. So I read that when I was still at school actually, and that kind of really blew my mind. And and also I think that there's this, because I'm interested in aging, I think there's this thing between bioenergetics and aging. You can see with metabolic rate, and you can even see with cancer. Cancer cells are mortal, and it's got like a very different metabolism, and it's not using oxidative phosphorylation as much. And it's also one of the things is it's the high glycolytic rate gives it like a lot of NADPH, which is good for reactive oxidation mitigation and stuff. I think there's a lot in there, and bioenergetics kind of gets. I don't know why people kind of ignore it. They so I think if you like that stuff, that's worth going into.
Sweet. Yeah, thank you for the recommendations. Where would be a good place to keep up with your work? Is it Medium? Is there a particular website? Like, how do people stay up to date with you in a respectful way where they don't leave mean comments? But yeah, we're
okay. No, that's a good idea. So the company hasn't even got a website at the moment, just been so stretched. But as I say, like there's so the aim is to have one at one point. But if you just kind of Google like Michael Forrest biophysical therapeutics, and it should come up. And also we've got more stuff coming out in the media, like in longevity.technology, which should come up if you do a Google search.
It'll be on the links too.
Yeah, and as I said, there's actually, I mean, we've got less than many longevity companies, but we've got kind of more because we've actually got like published patents and papers and things like that. So people are really, really keen and can kind of look into that. And also, I'm happy for people to contact me. Maybe I'll give my email about that. I might regret this, but
maybe let them, if there's like Twitter or something. I don't want people like bombasting.
Oh, okay, that's a good idea. So I've got Twitter. So I've only been on. I'm quite new to Twitter. So my handle is Forrest, Forrest with 2 R's _ Ph.D.
Yeah, and it'll be in the show notes too. Yeah. I'm starting to use Twitter more, which I don't really enjoy actually. Right, so I'm having to do all this kind of, I don't know, I'm becoming like a social media manager or something, and having to do all this. You can set up an automation where you just like you make one thing that has like all the posts and just like sends it wherever you want, and then you don't have to really engage with anyone if you wanted to. But I try and like raise my profile by kind of getting involved in discussions and things like that, and I find it very distracting. I don't know how people do. I don't know how Elon gets any work done. The amount that he tweets. It's insane. I use Twitter for research, Yeah, on Twitter, there's like so many scientists that just like tweet their research, like David Sinclair or SENS
Yeah,
or what have you. And I basically just go to those pages, and then every time I see something political, I click block, or like I try to let Twitter know I'm not interested. I just want to see science, and it
yeah,
usually
yeah,
works
yeah,
out.
yeah.
I'm trying to train it to only bring me the like cool innovation or stuff on like Native
Yeah,
Americans or indigenous people and stuff.
yeah.
But
No,
yeah, alrighty then.
I too, I try and stay out of politics because that's just a quagmire to like a
Yeah, it's
yeah.
a waste of
Sometimes I
time.
even go like I'm like and like writing. I'm like no, hold back. It's just for work. Just stay out of everything. And also it'd be even more of a like a torching of time. I don't know how lots of these people have time. I mean,
Yeah, I know some really smart people that it's just like when you talk about some political things, they just they'll just burn the rest of their day and not realize that they just gave someone free energy. It's like you could spend that time wisely. You don't get it back. Like that person doesn't even care. If anything, they're just like like savoring it. They're like little narcissists, maybe even like a little vampire, a little emotional vampire. But I want to so I know we're at the end. So I just want to thank you so much, Michael, for coming on the show, for crushing the criticism. And so from now on, if someone criticizes you, you just link them to the show, and they will know not to mess with you. And if you ever have anything like cool coming on, you're welcome to come back on. We'll talk about it at length. But seriously, thank you for taking the time and for being on the show today.